Have you ever noticed your steering wheel feeling heavy, making strange noises, or not responding smoothly? These are often signs of a problem with your power steering system. But here's the truth. Many of these warning signs overlap, whether it's the pump, the rack and pinion, or both. And that's why most people misdiagnose the issue, wasting time and money on parts they don't need. In this video, I'll show you the main symptoms and help you figure out whether the problem is with the pump, the rack, and pinion, or both, so you can diagnose it correctly from the start. With these 10 most common power steering symptoms, you'll know exactly what's going on and how to tackle it before it gets worse. Number 1. Steering feels heavy or hard to turn. One of the first things you'll notice when something's wrong with your power steering system is that the steering wheel feels heavier than usual or harder to turn. And here's the tricky part. This can happen because of a failing pump or a bad rack and pinion. If the pump is failing, it can't build enough hydraulic pressure, making the wheel harder to turn, especially at low speeds. If the rack and pinion is damaged internally, or has internal leaks, pressure doesn't reach the steering gear properly, causing the same heavy steering feel. If the heaviness changes with engine RPM, suspect the pump. But if the steering stays heavy all the time, no matter how much you rev the engine, the problem is probably inside the rack and pinion. Number 2. Power steering fluid leak. Leaks are another shared symptom, and location is key to identifying the culprit. A leak from the front of the engine near the serpentine belt usually points to a bad pump seal or cracked pump housing. A leak near the steering rack boots or tie rods often indicates rack and pinion seals are failing. Clean the system first, and then trace the path of fresh fluid. Following that trail will usually lead you straight to the failing component. That's how you pinpoint which part is leaking. Number 3. Whining, squealing, or growling noises. If you hear whining or growling when turning the wheel or starting the car, that's usually from the pump. A bad pump bearing or low fluid due to a weak pump creates high-pitched noises that change with engine speed. The rack, on the other hand, rarely causes whining, but it can create knocking or clunking sounds from worn internal gears or loose tie rods. If the noise rises and falls with RPM, the pump is likely the culprit. But if the sound only happens while steering and feels more mechanical than hydraulic, the problem is probably inside the rack and pinion. Number 4. Vibration or unusual feedback in the steering wheel. This one can involve both components, but in different ways. A failing power steering pump can send pulsations through the system, especially if air has entered the fluid or the hydraulic pressure is fluctuating. These pressure ripples travel up to the steering wheel and feel like rhythmic vibrations. A worn rack and pinion, on the other hand, often creates loose or uneven feedback, sometimes even a slight play or wobble in the wheel, especially when driving over bumps or during quick steering inputs. If the vibration gets worse with engine RPM or improves after changing the fluid, the pump is likely at fault. But if the vibration happens mainly over bumps or changes with steering angle, the rack and pinion is probably where the problem lies. Number 5. Steering wheel doesn't return to center. One warning sign that's usually pointing straight at the rack and pinion is when your steering wheel doesn't snap back to center after a turn. Inside the rack, worn internal valves or excess mechanical friction can prevent the wheel from snapping back as it should, while a weak power steering pump might contribute if the hydraulic pressure is too low. This is far less common. If the wheel remains sluggish, even with the correct fluid level and proper system pressure, you can almost certainly point the finger at the rack and pinion. Number 6. Vehicle pulls to one side. If your car drifts or pulls to one side even when your steering wheel is perfectly centered, that's almost always a rack and pinion problem. Inside the rack, uneven internal pressure, a bent rack gear, or worn seals can cause unequal steering assist, making the car veer to one side. A failing power steering pump generally affects both sides equally, so it's rarely the cause of a pull. If the pull is consistent, regardless of speed or road conditions, you can safely suspect the rack and pinion. Number 7. Metal shavings in the reservoir. This one is almost always the pump. Internal wear on the pump's vanes or bearings releases tiny metal particles into the fluid. A failing rack and pinion usually doesn't produce metal shavings. If it has issues, you're more likely to notice leaks or play in the steering wheel instead. Finding metal in the reservoir is a clear sign that your pump is breaking down and needs attention. Number 8. Fluid level drops without visible leaks. If your fluid level keeps dropping, but you see no drips on the ground, both components could be responsible, but in different ways. The rack might be leaking internally into the boots, where fluid gets trapped and doesn't hit the ground. The pump might have a small internal bypass leak that lowers pressure and fluid over time. Check the steering rack boots. If they're swollen or wet, that's your hidden leak. Number 9. Clunking or knocking noises when steering. If you hear clunking or knocking noises when turning the wheel, it almost always points to the rack and pinion. Worn internal gears, damaged bushings, or loose tie rods inside the rack produce these mechanical sounds, especially at low speeds. A power steering pump doesn't make clunking noises. Its sounds are usually whining, growling, or squealing from fluid or bearing issues. If you hear clunks, it's a mechanical problem in the rack, not the pump. Number 10. Delayed steering response or lag. If you notice a delay between turning the steering wheel and the wheels actually responding, this could involve either the power steering pump or the rack and pinion. A weak pump may not supply hydraulic pressure quickly enough, causing a sluggish feel. A worn rack, on the other hand, can have excessive internal play or worn valve seals, which also slows the steering response. If the delay changes with engine RPM, the pump is likely the issue. If the lag is constant, regardless of engine speed, the rack and pinion is probably worn. So, there you have it, the 10 most common power steering symptoms, and how to tell if the real problem is the pump, the rack, and pinion, or both. Remember, many of these signs overlap, but small differences, like where the leak appears, whether the noise changes with RPM, or if the wheel pulls, can tell you exactly where to look. If you found this breakdown helpful, check out our next video where we cover other common car warning signs and symptoms you shouldn't ignore. It's packed with tips to help you spot problems early and keep your vehicle running smoothly